Hola, welcome back.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Welcome to another episode of
Thank you, X.
Thank You X. We have an amazing one for you. I know we say that every time, but it's because every time it's true.
It just keeps getting better and better, Papi. We like fine wine.
We like fine wine.
What do we have today, Gabby? I'm excited. I love meeting your friends. Tell me who we got on the table.
We have one of my besties, Valerie Matron. Valerie is a Peruvian children's book author, a real estate agent, and owner of Take Up Space LA. Her real estate company takes an educational approach to the overwhelming process of looking for a home and encourages clients to take up space. She has a very feminine and nurturing approach to real estate, which is awesome. Valerie is trilingual. Okay. So she's not only bilingual, como nosotras español, inglés, she actually speaks English, Spanish, and French. And she teaches workshops of vision board workshops and manifestation workshops in English, Spanish, and French. She's lived all over the world. She's a children's book author, and she's worked everywhere from the mayor's office in New Orleans, Louisiana, to the Amazon jungle in Ecuador in healthcare. She's run the gamut when it comes to professional achievements. So I really wanted to have her here on our show. Reason why I really wanted to have a very professionally successful woman, Latina, because she is Peruvian. I feel like the three of us are Latina, Colombian, Honduran, Venezuelan, Peruvian. The three of us grew up in cultures or in a society that really values the achievements of women in regards to acquiring a man, having babies, and
there's just family. It's just so many stigmatisms that you like grow up with subconsciously as a child in a Latina family, like either here or in back home, like in our country. But I think more here because everyone else like isn't experiencing the same thing, and you come home and you have this like expectation set on you from like a young age. Like in Colombia, you're born, y eres una mujer, inmediatamente they pierce your ears. That's a girl, like right away, like feminine, everything, and you just, from that moment, I feel like just starts this whole like stigmatism of like what you should be like and how you should,
and I think
little tricks and stuff to do for like men, and it's like, what the fuck, like,
yeah, like to do some, how do you flirt, how do you behave? I think the backlash of that is kind of what our experience has been a little bit. We've talked a little bit about on the show that we put a lot of our value on career and how much of that is also or can be also a toxic relationship. So, well, first, hi, Valerie.
Hello.
Hi. I'm so excited to be on the show. I love this podcast so much. And I know I said show, but it's because it's in video and to me it feels like a show. But I just love that you guys are taking on such interesting topics and coming at it from this like point of view that's very reflective. Even like the title, like Thank You X, is just so reflected and coming from a place of gratitude and growth. And I think the stuff that we're going to be talking about today is an area that I have had a lot of growth in, a lot of reflection, a lot of realizations, a lot of shocks, and a lot of things that I wasn't expecting from just going into the career place. And I always say that I actually did not know that sexism was a thing until I entered the workplace, which is really weird because I knew of sexism, but I knew of sexism like in a very overt, like objectification of women, or like you said, from the moment that you're little, what are the expectations of you as a girl? So I knew all that, and I had a big brother figure. So I always was like trying to like fight against that. And I have so many stories of when I was a kid of like all my reactions of it. But it wasn't until the workplace that I felt the discrimination. That's why I'm saying sexism in that sense. Because I never felt like I got less directly maybe from my dad, or even in education. I think that that's why women do so well in school and everything, because there's a rule book. We're really good at behaving. We're really good at, oh, there's a grading system, let me do it. And then you get to the career, you get into your career and it's like, the Wild Wild West. It's like a jungle. And the people who get ahead are not the hard workers, are not the people who put their head down necessarily. And I think that women are very socialized into doing that. And ironically, I'm actually wearing a shirt, you can't tell, but it says feminism.
Oh,
And
girl, give us a little zoom. Give us a little zoom.
Yeah. Can you see?
Oh my God, it does.
Sorry, it says feminist. Sorry, so feminist. And it's funny because it's like that's also such a journey of like, what is it to be a feminist? And I think like the old version of feminist was be like a man, make your own money, leave the kids at home.
I don't need a man.
Yeah, I don't need a man, independence,
Yeah.
like basically all these things.
Like, I will say part of why feminism has been a journey for me, and why even talking about career in this way has been, I really wanted to talk about it, is because I went from, wait a minute, this is weird. I don't want to be a girl that's just defined by the guy that she's with or who her boyfriend is. Because I grew up in Honduras. So we were qualified as girls as like who our boyfriend was and how cool was he, and were you able to have a boyfriend and at what age, or not even boyfriends. How many admirers do you have? Do boys like you? A lot of that was a lot of what a girl's value was. Did you get a Valentine's Day card? Did you get flower? I mean, it was like, I remember it was a scoring system of who was cool, who was cool depending on how many boys liked you. So I went from complete rejection of like, that is not my value, that is not my worth, head down, my career is my value, to over giving my career an over importance,
like overdoing it.
Toxicity.
It's like, that's why they say like the pendulum swings. And I feel like the three of us, we rejected so much what was given to us, and now we're like, wait a minute, is it actually what I was told is the feminist or the feminism, which is like, be more like a man,
right?
Be tough instead of being vulnerable, be outside the home instead of being at home,
right?
And everything that comes with that. And just because I'm afraid I'll forget it later, but I have like an example of just how I used to reject it. Like, I remember just like, because you said the ears pierced, and so it made me think of like how we get our ears pierced when we're babies. So it made me think of
newborns.
When was there a time? Newborns, like week 1, you know?
Like day 3, bitch, in Barranquilla, they're like, es una niña, dale, like,
like cut the umbilical cord, like, there we go, like, And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it makes me think of like, when did it enter in our consciousness, like, to be a girl? I don't know. I don't have any memory of not feeling the weight of being a girl. And granted, I had an older brother, so maybe I had more of a stark contrast for that. But when I was little, I remember like I would play with my Barbies, and all my games were about how like the Barbie was not getting married. Also, I had one Ken. To be fair, I had one Ken who had to be like the dad, the boyfriend, the sister, the brother, you know, like the neighbor, like all this stuff. I was missing Kens in my life, I must admit. But still, I was like, I remember just like, that was, you know, because you create narratives with your dolls and whatnot. And that was the narrative. And I rejected it so much. And my aunt told me that she remembers how I would go around the neighborhood and I would tell little girls, I was like, I'm not having babies. I'm like 5. And they were like, and she just remembers that they would be like, you know, like, pero por qué, you know? And I was like, porque te sale donde haces pipí, you know? And I was just like, no, I don't know who taught me that, but I was just like, that sounds horrible. Same hole. Why?
And babies.
I was like, why? And it's so funny that my aunt just remembers me like, just like being a little activist, like trying to get be like, no girl, like, that's not for us.
But how can you say that? Because I remember like at the age of 12 or 13, and I always say that, it's a bit, I always, like, since I was 12 or 13, I would go to my parents and I'd be like, I'm not getting married, just so you know, like maybe when I'm 40. And literally I remember my parents being like, okay, you're 13, like calm down. But it was that much of a rejection of why do I have to get married? And I remember being a teenager and even telling my girlfriends at school that I loved. And I was like, I don't want a boyfriend. And they're like, how do you not want a boyfriend? And, half of them were like, if I'm not married by the age of 21, I'm a loser. You know, it was a lot of that was in
so much. Yeah, that narrative was so common growing up. And I mean, I feel like I never really thought about it either. I was hyperactive. I was like all over the place. I'm like, hablando talking to everybody, right? I didn't have time to even think about like boys. Obviously, I had crushes and whatever, but never thought about it. And then eventually, like, I met someone that like opened my eyes to like, you know, like boys and, you know, like, oh, okay, then maybe I'll give it a chance. But I think I always still stayed like strong in like my beliefs, you know, and like maybe sometimes I would be classified as a feminist, like because you said something, Valerie, where you were like, what is a feminist, like what does it take, you know? But I feel like it has like different layers to it, like different aspects.
so many layers.
So many layers.
You know, like
I think a lot of it is like the journey, you know, like the journey of like rejection to overdoing like that rejection. Because I mean, I just got married, like civil.
Oh, congratulations.
We'll get there.
And that's like a whole journey.
We'll get to that topic.
Yeah, because it was
a journey.
It was a journey because of how much I rejected it.
And I have to say, watching Valerie go from, I mean, she still very much is like, holds on to like that. I don't want to say that old way of thinking. I think that way as well, but just, I believe that in watching her with her husband, who's a great friend of mine, and I've watched their interactions together, how beautiful marriage can be and how it does complete your life in such a beautiful way. And I think, and we'll dive into a little bit, I do want to ask you some questions about your work and what you did, what you've done for so many years.
We go a bit off topic.
Yeah, we always go, it's all over the place. It's a podcast. It's fine. We're fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's gone. But I did, and we'll dive into that, but it got to the point where I said, why am I rejecting so much of my feminine power? Why am I wanting to embody my masculine so much by being this career girl that doesn't need men, that doesn't need to date, that doesn't need to fulfill herself in a relationship, without realizing that there is a lot of power in the feminine? And I think a lot of the feminist movement, certain areas of it, almost rejects the feminine power. There is power in having babies and being able to create a human being. There is power in being in your home, running a home.
Is there power in that? Power in creating a baby, creating a human life?
There's strength. You know,
is there anything more powerful?
Is there anything more?
We create life. I read that somewhere. We create life. Those 3 words, and that has stuck with me like glue. Like I literally see what I saw that day every time. Like we create life. My sister's pregnant now, and sometimes I stare at her and I'm like, this girl is making ears right now. Making a damn brain. Like, what do you know what I mean? Like that's wild.
It's like insane. The most intricate intelligent system that just exists.
Yeah.
The nervous system, like everything, like that's crazy. That's wild to me.
And,
like, that's
and just feminist energy. Men have that feminine energy, but we create it. It's a home is created by a woman. And I just feel like, and we'll dive into it even more in your journey to that point, but I feel like, why did I reject it for so long? And I've heard with your comments and, you know, what I've been able to observe in your journey, that there is a rejection of that power. And it's because a part of us in that rejection of those norms, societal norms, we rejected in that fail swoop what makes us so powerful. A lot of what makes us powerful, because we don't have to embody our masculine to be powerful.
Yeah.
And, so yeah.
Or to be equal, you know, we already know. So amongst the 3 of us, it would be silly to say we're equal. Like that would make no sense.
Yeah, we're not.
It would make no sense. Like it just doesn't really apply to how you should speak about humans anyway. So what is our obsession with let's be equal? And I get that it comes from, hey, equal access, equal rights. It does. And I wholeheartedly support that. And it's, you know, and when I've experienced not being able to do things, like, you know, it's hurt me, but I think we need to move past it. Like, why is it so taboo? Like even right now I have anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, people are going to think I don't care about equal rights.
No,
but like, why is it, why can we move past that to just acknowledge? It's silly for us right now if you were like, we're equal. We know we're not equal. We're so unique and have our differences and have to respect where we are in the process. And men or women, we create these massive buckets and then we're like, let's make them the same, when there's no way they will ever be the same in just looking at the massive buckets, just like from a biological standpoint, from an energetic standpoint, from so many things. And that oversimplification of what we're striving for, I think honestly has us all very confused. And I think goes back to what our individual journeys and many women out there and even many men, like, what is it? Even like we mentioned my husband. So like, I'm sure it's challenging for him too. Like, how do I show up? Like, what is the thing to do now to support women, et cetera, versus what are those individual needs that person has?
Right. And then, and even before we dive into, for example, your career and our stories of our careers, I would like to say, we're not saying that women can't do these things, that they don't have the ability to pursue a career, and of course they can. That, and even more, there's power in that. What I think, at least for me, what I'm trying to even kind of own myself is that that's not my only source of power or the most powerful source of power I have. Mm-hmm. I do believe that as a woman, I acquire and have a lot of untapped power because I've been so concerned and obsessed on being masculine, not needing anything, not needing a relationship, having a career.
Inherent. So much power that, we cover ourselves in part of the world. And that in and of itself is a very powerful thing. I think the act of women covering themselves or their hair is, to me, evidence of how powerful we are.
Right. That's how powerful our hair is. That's how powerful our beauty is.
Presence. Our energy,
our presence, our nature, our innatness of it,
Yeah. Even like, I don't know, I'm not sure if you guys knew this, but when a woman is on their period, like when they're going through their menstrual cycle, and when you have it, right, you give off like a certain aroma to other human beings, like especially male species, that makes you more attractive. So like, even just like that in itself, like science to the brim, like even just us while we're going through that painful like cramp or whatever, like we're exuding something from us that is like so powerful and attractive to the opposite sex. Like that's wild, like.
And this is not to elevate women over men either.
It isn't, but it's just to highlight things that no one speaks about because we've been so suppressed. Like we're not over here like F men, like, no, like I agree with the community.
That didn't work.
What I was going to say was to elevate nature. I feel like, because when I think of periods, I think of the moon, and I think of like how the moon impacts the tides. Like how fucking amazing is that? Like, I've always loved that. I'm always like, how do we not believe in magic? Like, honestly, when we know that to be true, right? And the fact that like as women, you can be around other women and that impacts your cycle. I think of
that's wild too.
Right.
That is crazy too.
Yeah. So I think of just like nature, like the fact that like woman and womanhood is like an archetype of something that's far greater than humans, period. And how much we've suppressed that. And you can see it with how we treat nature.
Yeah. So off that note, I do want to go back. I know we all talked about a little bit about like how we grew up and how we rejected like for everything from like the fact that we got our ears pierced when we were still in the hospital to playing with dolls and not wanting our Barbies to get married. And I personally wanted my Barbie to be like a gazillionaire. There was a soap opera in Honduras called La Dueña, the owner, and she owned like an estate, and she was like this orphan girl. Her parents were gazillionaires.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, and it was from Mexico, and she was like a cowgirl, and she goes to like her like estate farm, whatever, in Mexico, and she was just like a badass bee, and she had been heartbroken by a man who was like after her money. So she was like, F that. So she moved. Anyway, she was this like rebellious woman. And I remember that really impacted me. So my Barbie was always like
what we grew up around. Like this was the narrative in the living room. Like, ay, pero por qué? Like cries in Spanish. Like also like as being Latinas, just with that, like Come on.
It's a
Like,
lot. It was a
so
lot of
glamorous.
everything, drilled
I
into
think
our
you guys
brain.
need to do an episode just on soap operas.
oh my God.
Just
We're
on
gonna
telenovelas,
do
you
one
know?
episode
Like
on Sábado
dissect
Gigante.
them. We should
I
like
really want to do an episode on Sábado Gigante y El Chacal.
oh,
That was formative, you guys. That was formative.
love that.
But going back to the three of us, at least for a few years, grew up in Latin America. That was very impactful for us. How do you think, especially you, Vale, that you were in Peru, you also lived in Atlanta, which you share in common with Vanessa, and then from that to you end up shortly after college working at the mayor's office in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is a very similar kind of city and vibration than Latin America in the sense that they are a little bit like, I don't want to say stuck in time because it's such a beautiful city. It's my hometown, but that kind of male female hierarchy. How did you see that affect you, both your behavior and those around you?
Well, I've always really rejected like even like the Latina. I think when you come from Latin America or anywhere, when you're an immigrant and you just are, and then you come to a new place and there's always going to be a stamp put on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think anything that had to do with you're a woman in the workplace, you're a Latina, and as explanations of maybe why I was experiencing like certain, I don't know, like behaviors or things like that. It didn't really make sense for me. It's almost like I wasn't really looking in the mirror.
Okay.
So I think that anything related to my experience there, I think was more of me figuring it out that things that I was experiencing in the workplace had to do with being a woman. I ended up eventually, like in my mid-20s, having a mentor, successful woman that worked at Microsoft. And one of the best things she did for me was she just presented to me an article that had been published in The Atlantic called The Confidence Gap. And it was like, if you're into astrology, it was like reading a natal chart where all of a sudden, like, things make sense, you know? And I remember reading and I was like, oh my God, it's not me. It's not me. Like, women suffer from confidence because when we go out there and we do something, we're labeled as aggressive, or it irks people. Like, people feel a little, and then they don't guide you, you know? And if I know in those settings, if I had been a man, I know that I was assertive. I know. It would have been like,
it would have been a different narrative.
Valerio, what an assertive guy. He belongs in politics,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
And instead, it was like, you know, like, she's asking too much. She's, you know, because all the things I was doing was what I thought made me a good employee and a good member of my office, which was being proactive, asking questions, pointing things out when they weren't lining up and things like that. And so I think that
you were managing funds, correct?
No, I wasn't managing funds. I was part of a fellowship program, and the fellowship program was really a 1-year program. And depending on your background, you got assigned to a specific area, but it was a very coveted, highly regarded fellowship, because most people that came from a fellowship would go from being a fellow to being like a director of a department or something like that. So it was a pretty big career opportunity and setup. So it wasn't like, oh, there's the intern. Like, there was a certain, like, you know, access you could get, and what they were expected to be, it was supposed to be like your first step into a career in local government.
This is like right after college.
Right after college.
Right after.
Well, a year after, but that's because I went to India and did something else before, but that's different. But yeah, my first real like 9-to-5 job after college, for sure.
Oh, okay. Nice. That's good.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I had actually applied the year before when I first graduated, and I made it to the finals and didn't get it. I totally botched my like board interview thing. And then I did it again when I came back. I just had like a little voice, and I think I was meant to be there. I think it was meant to be part of my journey and my growth, not only to mention that it was a great opportunity and a great job, because, so to answer your question, what I was in charge of was, because my background was in international development and because of my languages, I was basically overseeing our international affairs for the city of New Orleans, like the mayor's office. So New Orleans is a tiny little city, but it gets so much international attention. So we would have, delegations from the Netherlands who wanted to learn about our water management, Australia who wanted to also learn about our water management, WWF, from China, and then anywhere from like the president of Honduras. So my job was like to create briefings for the mayor. Like the president of Honduras was probably like in my first month, and I was there in the meeting, and I was sort of creating the talking points and giving the background on the country or the delegation. So anywhere from like a student delegation from Denmark to like the president of a country that would just visit New Orleans, and they all had a different intention or purpose. So I was sort of the liaison for that. Okay. And then the other side at the time, they were also creating what, I don't know if it still exists, but it's called the Office of Neighborhoods, which was, I worked for Mayor Landrieu, and it was his first year in office, and it was 5 years after Katrina. So it was his attempt to basically build a relationship and put some skin in the game with what all the nonprofits were doing. So I helped do some of like the big community volunteering events and kind of help set that office up. So I was kind of like in those areas, and I had access to basically my direct supervisor was one of the mayor's direct advisors. So he kind of had a group of 6 very close advisors, and one of them was who I reported to.
So that's a huge, it seems like a huge undertaking, also really exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Male heavy environment. Am I right or am I wrong about that? Like, how were your interactions at work? Because I know, and you've shared with us, Valerie has shared with me how she really struggled at the workplace with power dynamics, but ironically, one of the people she reported to, or that kind of, I don't want to say sabotaged or kind of got her in trouble, right? Was a woman. And I think that's,
it was in this job, this same position?
At this job, at this position. And I think it's one of our talking points as the strongest kind of pillars of sexism a lot of times are women, because we are sexist with our own selves. And unfortunately, we've been taught to put other women down.
Well, it comes down to like comparison, like we have this issue of like comparing. I mean, not everybody, obviously, but like there's people who, especially women who are probably like involved with a lot of different men, they probably see another successful woman and they're like, oh no, like there can't be 2 of us.
It's very subconscious. I think it's very important to highlight that. I don't think anybody intentionally,
like thinks it and does that. No,
right.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, it's very subconscious, and it comes from our own rejection of ourselves and what they have had to go through. So, I think it's now pretty typical, especially in the last, from like millennials to like the upcoming generation, that older generations are always going to feel that the younger generations are entitled because they're like, they had it so much harder, right? Or to answer your question, like the reason things were very male dominated was because of hierarchical. Like it's a very, I think, masculine idea of just having just like a certain hierarchy. And I know that there's matriarchy, so I'm not saying that women don't believe in hierarchy and the purpose it serves, but the way it exists in the world, in hierarchical companies or government or healthcare, which was another industry I went into, is very much based on, I think, how how men think of like power and structure and dynamics and stuff like that. So that was one reason, like one reason that I think I didn't really get any advocates. I just needed someone to say, hey, it was a very political environment, and I think I was very naive. And I just needed someone to say, hey, Valerie, I see you're trying to do this thing. I see you're really interested in this, but you know what? You're maybe like ruffling some feathers. So why don't you talk to this person before you go? And I had no guidance, And so instead, I would have things happen as I'm working really hard, and no one's giving me feedback. It's not like anyone's saying, hey, we don't like the work you're doing. In fact, they're saying we like the work you're doing, but I'm almost getting like a slap in, in the backhand indirectly and not very directly. So very passive aggressive, I guess, is a way that you could describe it. But to answer your question, I'm sorry, the male. So was it male? Okay. So I think, yes, it was. I mean, the mayor's male. All his advisors, his top advisors, except one, were women.
Oh,
correct.
Interesting.
And I definitely experienced they were all like obviously very talented, etc. But I think women who are very successful, like you got to understand, like I'm new in this job, like I'm like, I'm super green. I'm starting. Yes, it's a cool job.
Yeah.
But, I'm super green. I have no experience. These women, are mid-level career, like totally at the top of their game. They're working for a mayor who's a great elected official, etc. They've had to lose part of themselves to be there. So yes, I think in general, the workforce is male dominated. Even when you have women, the structure is male dominated.
When
you can't bring your
and when you say they had to lose part of themselves to be there, is it fair to say that maybe they had to lose a lot of their feminine to be there, a lot of their feminine aspects, right?
I think so.
Like maybe reject it, put it down, because they're like, this feminine power is not going to get me to where I want to go. Maybe even on a subconscious level to embody their masculine to get to that level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so hard because I'm still learning what is my masculine traits and what is my feminine traits. Like I haven't figured it out. Like Gabby will point it out to me when like I am doing something that's very, I'm leading with the masculine. What is the masculine? I mean, it's like, more mental than heart opening. If you guys know Brene Brown is a great example of really what is feminine power, which all of us have access to it, both men and women, which is vulnerability. And sometimes I think I'm being vulnerable, but I'm not. I'm just maybe oversharing or I'm overstepping. You know what I mean? Like I'm also like I think all of us were like, wait, was that vulnerable? Like it's almost like you get to a point you're like, wait, I need to go further. Like that was really the vulnerable thing. I thought the other thing was more patched up or whatever. So I think it's really hard for us to know as it's happening. All I can tell you is that the workforce, like the workplace, and now I have my own business precisely because it's not welcoming to women. And that's why women drop, women drop. And that could be from policies, family leave and things like that, but also just culturally, we get more reprimanded for behavior that, like I said, I've had professional reviews where they're like, you're doing an amazing job. I'm like, okay, anything else you should let me know. And they're like, oh, well, actually, yeah, now that you mention it, gotten feedback that you're aggressive. I'm like, okay, can you give me an example? No examples, right? So
it's because you're taking up space. That makes sense now. Like your whole concept, your new, mission and what you stand for. Okay, this makes sense. I like that. Yeah. When you said that was the first words that popped in my head.
Yeah, take up space. They are the first words that pumped. I'm glad that you got there. It's working.
I love that. That is amazing. I love all of that.
Yeah. So I think that I think the workplace is the structure of it. I think is patriarchal or whatever. I don't even know what to call it anymore. I just know that it's not about bringing your whole self. It's about work first, who you are second.
Yeah.
Very self-interested.
I think it's like that for men too. Like I think men are also experiencing that same type of, structure where like they can't be feminine or else they're seemed weak. Like it's the opposite thing, and then that's why we run into issues with males who aren't in touch with their feminine side, and it shows
in leadership positions.
And
do you know how many times I've been, because then I worked in healthcare and I worked in government. And so I was in a field where like, you hold press conferences, you do things like crises arise. And I can't tell you how many times like I've been in a room where like a male leader is speaking and he's just speaking over people. Like it's almost like a politician when you hear a politician and you're like, they're really just saying what you think they want to hear. And they're not really just really acknowledging, like they're not really going there,
Connection. There's no connection.
No connection.
Which is part of the feminine, to be able to connect, to be able to empathize. What I find, and we've talked about this with Ravioli and Ravi Glover, that we had problems with them in our relationships with them, that they did not embody the feminine, or they embodied it in a very different way. When the irony is, when a man is connected to their feminine, they are more of a man. They're able to connect with the people that they're trying to help, that they're trying to provide for. They're able to empathize with feelings, because what is the feminine? Feminine equals feelings. So if you're in touch with your feelings as a man, you're going to be a stronger man, because instead of you letting them possess you and reject and oppress your feelings and walking around like this ticking bomb, you're actually going to be more in your skin, more powerful, able to talk with people, connect to people. What do you need? Because men, that's what they are at the end of the day, is they're providers. A man, the better a man is a provider, the more complete he feels. But how are you able to provide for someone when you're not able to connect to them because you're disconnected from yourself? So absolutely, does it affect women to be disconnected from their feminine? 110%. But it affects men just the same. So we're not out to hate men. Like, men are victims of this as well.
Of course not. Yeah.
I think ultimately I didn't succeed how I wanted to succeed in either like government or healthcare, the industries I was in, because I was leading with my masculine. And I really feel, this is just like very personal, but I feel like it's my spiritual journey to embrace the feminine, because I rejected it. I mean, I'm still rejecting a lot of it. And I was as analytical, as mental, as like you can be. I would go to my bosses and I was like this, but it was very masculine. I was very masculine in all my jobs. The problem was I was not rewarded. That's what I was seeking. I was seeking either like having advocates or just doors open up or support in my initiatives, because I've always been very self-driven, and anybody who's worked with me will attest to the fact that I would just start a lot of things, but it was like I was alone. And I think that I those things didn't happen in some ways because, one, they weren't meant to happen for me. I think I was meant to have another journey. And two, because I think if I had been a man, they would have been welcomed. They would have been embraced. But I had these qualities as a woman, and it works for a lot of women. That's how a lot of women get ahead. So I was like, this is the thing. This is the way to be. This is how all my female bosses are. But I know that it didn't work for me because I was meant to not be there. I was not meant to live my life like that, continuing in this, just rat's race in using power that is not the feminine power. I was somehow being called to do something else differently. And a lot of women that have been successful, they either burnt out or they continue, but they're doing it, I think, in many ways, in, using more like their masculine power. And there are some brilliant female leaders in many industries who actually really take from both. And I think that helps them sustain themselves and continue.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have you guys heard of Marianne Williamson? She has a book called A Woman's Worth. I love that book. I feel like she is someone who like really touches on like the feminine power. And she was in, political positions, and she had moments where she was faced with like woman on woman, like how you mentioned earlier. And she noticed, she was like, it wasn't them, like it was me. She had something, how she was talking about like, we're afraid to allow ourselves to bloom fully because there's like a general disapproval that fills the air when someone's like, oh, that little lady forgot her place, or you know what I mean, like she's out of line, or oh, that's not what a lady does. Like, but where, like we are meant to cross those lines, like we've lived in so much fear, I feel like, that and now these topics are coming up.
What is feminine? I remember when I was in a dark place after breaking up with Ravioli, I was talking to one of our friends, Andrea, and I was saying something about like how he had said that sometimes I emasculated him, which of course my first reaction was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. How did I emasculate? And
that was him.
What did I do? And my friend's like, well, how can you emasculate someone who's a man? That is impossible. He's doing it to himself. He doesn't feel masculine enough. Therefore, when he's around a powerful woman like you, he feels emasculated. Same with a feminine. She told me, she's like, did he ever make you feel less feminine? And I was like, well, it's funny that you say that. No, I did feel at times too strong, but I've never felt less feminine. And she's like, because you are a female. So anything that you do is feminine, period. So the fact that we've gone through life a lot of the times waiting for men to tell us what is feminine, are we feminine enough, is also kind of laughable, because we're taking cues from a man to tell us what feminine is. We are feminine, period. So I remember growing up and being a teenager and being really feisty and having always a political opinion and not being afraid to speak up in front of my father and his friends. And they would always kind of tease and be like, there's your lawyer. Like, my brother went to law school, and they were like,
my parents growing up told me I
she's
needed
the
to be a
lawyer.
lawyer.
Yeah, she's the lawyer. But they
Yeah.
said it not in a way of like, wow, she could actually be a lawyer. They said it as like,
as if it was bad.
yeah,
Or
as
like,
if it was bad. So
yeah.
a part of me rejected that kind of narrative and was like, well, yes, I am feisty, but down deep below, there was a huge sense of rejection and a huge sense of not being able to belong because I was not submissive and agreeable enough. And I find that to be, I recently was in a debate with several men who, even to certain points, were being disrespectful. And I wanted to be agreeable so badly. And I just couldn't, because what they were saying went against my morals and my principles. But in me, in me, I was like, oh, but I want to be liked. I don't want to be disliked. And it's because as women, we are told these are the barometers that you need to follow in order to be liked, desired, et cetera, et cetera. Which I think is also, for us, the three of us, we kind of swung that pendulum the other way. And, someone like Valerie, who was in government and in healthcare and in a lot of, positions where there are a lot of male leaders as well as female, but then you and I picked careers, both fashion and acting and entertainment, which are technically very feminine, but are also
still the hierarchy there.
Right. Yeah. They still are very much run by men. And also we're being told how we need to look, how we need to behave in order to be considered desirable.
I was listening yesterday to a podcast that was saying like the new number of Fortune 500 company CEOs is 41 women, which is, I think, like 8% or something like that. And it was still saying like how, so when I was going through this whole experience, I felt like it was me. Like, I was like, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not doing my job well. I'm not liked. I don't fit in here. I don't belong.
Because you weren't like advancing.
Yeah, because of just a lot of things that happened. And ultimately I ended up having to walk away.
Okay.
But what ended up just like, I just look at the numbers and you start realizing why there's more educated women like that have graduated from graduate degrees, etc., than men. Statistically, how are there more women that are more educated than men, that are graduating in higher numbers than men, but when you look at the workforce, they're not represented?
Well, let me tell you, in my household, my mother was much more, and on an educational level, much more prepared than my father. She had a master's degree. She was always excellent in school, never had a problem. My mother was trying to excel, or not even trying. She really enjoyed excelling in these things that are more masculine, such as education and a master's degree and such. And really during growing up, and this is kind of how I want to segue into my next question, kind of growing up, my mother stayed at home. Having said that, even though she was more prepared in education wise than my father had careers where she really needed to be home with us, or she felt she needed to be home with us. And I have to say, I am so unbelievably grateful that I had a stay-at-home mother, because she was the rock, the foundation of my brother and my life. Had she been a working mother, I would have admired her, I'm sure just the same, but different aspects. But having her at home was unbelievably important to me and my brother. And I'm sure I'm a different person because of it. So I don't think that her not really going into the workplace during my childhood, for most of my childhood, was something that I critique or criticize. I honestly am unbelievably grateful to her for it, which is kind of how I want to segue into my next question. Val, now that you're married, I think another aspect or journey for you has been, Valerie is married to an incredibly successful man who we always joke is very comfortable with being surrounded by the feminine, very comfortable, and really excels and loves and revels.
Where's he from? Is he also Latino or he's American?
No, he's Canadian, but originally
Oh,
from
they're
Kenya.
nice.
Like Indian Kenyan,
Indian Kenyan, but he actually is
Okay.
also
but
from
Canadian culturally.
a Muslim background as
Yeah,
well.
he's Muslim. His family's
So
Muslim.
he does come from a conservative background as well. And but
Very clear roles.
very clear
Yeah.
roles.
So there are a lot of things that are very Latino-esque, I would say, that we share culturally.
I agree.
When we get together with his family, it's like, like kids are running wild, like there's no structure to the evening. You up for 6-7 hours, like there's Dios y Tias and like primos y from all sides, So a lot of things culturally, and there are very distinct roles. Like except one of like, maybe like my one of his cousin's husband, like, I mean, it's always the women, who are doing the work at home, who are
Does he think, this might be personal, has he ever viewed you as a feminist?